there's no reason why we should agree on a lot of things because the ideology are different. But this is an issue that we are in total agreement on, and I just thank her for signing on to Heather's bill. I also want to do this over here. I've got victims over here, victims of the judicial system. And I want all of you that wants to talk to them individually when we get through this press conference. But over here, I've got Lee Grenade. Over here, I've got Aaron Singley. Aaron's brother was killed at a party, and nobody ever served any time for the murder of his brother. His mother's back right here. Here's his mother, Miss Singley, and I guess a brother-in-law's back there. Over here is a man named Ricky Bryant. Many of you have heard the story of Brenda Bryant. That's her husband. Brenda is living in exile in North Carolina, partially due to the way our legal system does things. Anybody that wants to know anything about Brenda, I've got some handouts about Brenda and her story. Right here is a couple that, the Hannahs, that live over in Darlington, Florence. They've got a story if you want to listen to them, their story. And then back here are some of my colleagues that have signed on to my bill. Over there is David Pascoe. David Pascoe is a solicitor who has pushed this issue like crazy for the last 3 or 4 years. Right here is my sheriff who got me into this trouble. His name is Lee Foster. I think he's the longest serving sheriff in the state of South Carolina. He's been the sheriff of Newberry County for 35 years. She's been in the House for 32. So, having said that, I want to talk to y'all, to the press, because without y'all, we don't ever get this done. Right now, I've got 23 signed on to my bill. Representative Bauer has 9 signed on to her bill. But with y'all's help, we can get 63 signed on one or the other bill, and we can get this thing done. So here's what I want to say to y'all. With liberty and justice for all. The main reason I'm here this morning is that those last 6 words of our Pledge of Allegiance are not easily obtained in South Carolina courtrooms. Very few South Carolina citizens have any understanding of how this state chooses its judges. Today, I want you to begin telling them. Tell your readers, tell your listeners that South Carolina is the only state in America that chooses its judges the way we do. Tell your readers, tell your listeners that a commission of 10 men and women, 5 of whom are appointed by the Speaker of the House and 5 of whom are appointed by the Senate, create a group known as the Judicial Merit Selection Commission, the JMSC. Tell your readers, tell your listeners that 8 of the 10 members currently serving on that commission are criminal defense attorneys. Tell your readers, tell your listeners that 6 of those 10 are also legislators. Make that point clear to those South Carolina citizens who read your articles or listen to your broadcasts. Say it this way: 6 criminal defense attorneys who are also legislators, 6 people who make the laws, 6 people who defend people accused of criminal activity. Those 6 people are responsible for creating the pool of potential men and women who could become judges. Let's talk sports. Ask your listeners, ask your readers, should one of the sports teams in a competition be allowed to decide who the referees should be? Ask your Clemson fans if they think it would be fair to let the Gamecock coaches pick the referees in this fall's classic. Ask your Gamecock fans if they think it would be fair to let the Tiger coaches pick this year's referees. Heaven forbid. Ask your readers, ask your listeners, should lawyers who will argue cases in front of judges be allowed to decide who those judges should be? Heaven forbid. Today, Representative Bauer and I ask you to tell your listeners, tell your readers, that our 2 bills will create a system that at least will begin to level the playing field. Either of our bills would stop the injustice of criminal lawyers selecting their judges. We need you working together as you alert South Carolina's people to the most egregious flaw in our judicial system. We the people can begin to see liberty and justice for all. Representative Bauer's bill, H 4179, or my bill, H 4183, would change the most basic flaw in our current system. Thank you.
Hey, excuse me, Gilda Cobb Hunter, District 95, Orangeburg and Dorchester counties. I am honored to stand here today with what I think probably is the tri-caucus. They said, you know, politics makes strange bedfellows. And as Representative White said, he and I disagree on just about everything we talk about in that chamber. But this is one issue that he and I, along with members of the Freedom Caucus, are on the same page. I am supportive of Representative Bauer's bill because I believe that change to the way we elect judges is long overdue. There have been efforts through all of these years on occasion to get this issue dealt with. And needless to say, surprise to no one, we've not been able to make any progress. And I really want people to know how much courage it has taken for Representative Bauer in particular to go against the grain, to go against the establishment. And when I say establishment, I'm talking Democratic and Republican establishment, to try to advocate for this change. But clearly, we need to figure out a better mousetrap. And what we've been doing, quite frankly, in my opinion, is not the way we need to elect judges. I have long been an advocate for popular election of judges, but I have come to realize that that may not be the best way, because the argument that people have made to me is about money and what it would require to run. And the other part of it is, do we really want our judiciary to become partisan? I would suggest to you that based on the results of the last several elections, that train has left the station. Our elections are already there. And so I am one who believes that there is no perfect legislation, but I do believe that taking all legislators, not just lawyer legislators, all legislators off the Judicial Merit Screening Commission is a step in the right direction. We have, and I love the way Representative White put it, because that's like the old folks say, that's making it plain. How are you going to support a system that allows one entity to hire, to pay, and to fire? There's something wrong with that picture. So I join my colleagues here in encouraging you as the media and those of you who are out there outside of this press, listening to the sound of these voices, please use your voice to reach out to senators and House members and say enough is enough. Time has come for change to come. So thank you for this. And those of you who cover the State House, you might want to get a still shot of this gathering behind me, because I'm not sure that you'll see that again. And in his absence, I want to acknowledge my sheriff of the South Carolina Sheriff's Association, Leroy Ravenel, who could not join us today. But I am honored to stand here with my solicitor, David Pasco, the First Judicial Circuit. Thanks so much for being here. Much appreciated.
Questions?
That's it. We'll take questions.
Any questions?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Criticized for perhaps a stance on abortion. Do you have any concern that empowering Governor McMaster or any future Republican governor to make selections for this commission
Yeah.
will perhaps make it easier to pass legislation that would restrict abortion?
So we're giving the governor ability to choose who's on the committee. He's not selecting the judges. He's not voting on the judges. So I don't see that as an issue.
Plans
Well,
to move this forward?
yeah.
First of all, we need to get some more sponsors on both bills.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, you're right, it is past crossover. I think that's by design because both these bills have been in the Judiciary Committee. You know, the process here is you get a bill in a committee, that doesn't mean anything. And we need to put pressure on the Judiciary Committee to get a bill out so that we can discuss it, so that maybe we can amend it. But the first thing we have to do is get a bill out of committee. And so right now, I think Ms. Cobb-Hunter addressed that pretty well. The establishment, I think you said, sometimes doesn't want bills to come out of committee. So we got to get a bill out of committee. That's why I beg you to start telling your readers about this problem. Maybe they'll put enough pressure on other people. We get a bill out of committee.
I'd also add this is a 2-year session, and we're both freshmen. We're coming into this with fresh eyes, with fresh energy. So we understand it may not happen overnight, while we think it should. But we're putting the energy behind it to make that change.
You need the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House to get this done. You're asking them to give up power. How have those conversations gone with those individuals? Any conversations that you've had?
Good.
I've had a conversation with the Speaker of the House. Let me back up. As you know, the governor, both in his inaugural address and his State of the State address, addressed this issue, judicial reform. As you also know, the Attorney General about 3 weeks ago had a press conference, had a bunch of solicitors and a bunch of sheriffs there addressing this issue. So there is pressure now from the top to do something. So I did go in and talk to the Speaker of the House when I introduced my bill. And his basic response is, well, I like some of it. His basic response was, I don't think the governor should have that much authority in appointing the people. But that's basic response. All those things can be changed if people understand, if the people put the pressure on leaders, then we can get some things done. You know, all these people are willing to compromise if they feel like they need to.
And if I may just add to that, none of us up here are naive enough to believe that this has been welcomed with open arms. We know the way this works, and even though they are freshmen, they've been here long enough to observe, to see how things work. But because something is difficult and because somebody is opposed to it, that doesn't mean that effort shouldn't be made to try it. And when it comes to who is sitting on the bench, passing judgment on South Carolinians, we need to be willing to take it to the people and make sure that we don't get discouraged, because leadership in either chamber or in both chambers, because let's be real, nobody wants to give up power. We're not confused about that. And they aren't going to just say, okay, y'all, here it is. We've got to make sure that the public, and that's Rep. White's point about y'all, if you amplify this issue in a way that, as people say, if you make it plain that you are talking about giving power resting in people who may benefit from that power, I think that kind of starts changing the conversation when the public starts talking to the House and Senate about what their wishes are.
And if I might, let me make it plain for the folks at home. I work very hard in my community to keep my constituents safe. Solicitor Pasco works very hard in his community to do the same thing. Sheriff Foster and the other sheriffs and chiefs of police in South Carolina work hard to protect the people and apprehend criminals when they break the law. We can't do our job if the referees, as Representative White put it, are being picked by the criminal defense bar. We can't keep you safe. So if you want to know why this should matter to you back at home, it's because we can't keep you safe if you don't step up and make your voice heard. Make the people in these 2 rooms over here understand that you're not asking them for this change, you're insisting on this change. You want to know something? I've never seen the governor walk into a courtroom with a briefcase in one hand and his arm around a client in the other. I've never seen the governor come into a court. The governor doesn't practice law, but the people in these two rooms do. So having the governor do that, and if you wanted to, even if you wanted to give the governor the power to pick the judges himself and say the terms of the judges should be changed to 8 years so that you get one shot as a governor. Then when that judge is up the next time, there'll be a new governor. So that judge won't be beholden to the governor that's in office, and they won't know who the next governor is going to be. We could structure something better, but the governor doesn't practice law. Governor McMaster has never been in my courtroom. David, has Governor McMaster ever showed up with a client to represent? No. I could poll the other colleagues, and they never could. The governor would be a much better person, because at least the governor isn't going to be stepping into the courtroom, and the judge is going to be sitting up on the bench going, oh, God, I got to practice, and this guy's going to pick me in a few years. I better do what he wants and take care of his client.
If I may, let me respond to that. Your question is based on the premise that the governor does not already have that kind of authority, influence to move his agenda. I would suggest that you look at the results of the last several judicial races, and if you look at the court, whether we're talking the Supreme Court or any of the lower courts, the governor's agenda, the agenda of this House, and the agenda of this Senate is already being felt and influences there. And so your question, I think, suggests that the governor doesn't have any influence now. And I would argue that the governor does have influence now, that the agenda as set by the Republican caucus, both House and Senate, in concert with the governor, is moving the governor's agenda. And so I would feel a lot better being in a position to influence one person, meaning the governor, as opposed to trying to get enough votes in here and in here to get a candidate who is going to be good on the bench. So I don't share your concern about what power it would be vested in the governor, because I think our current system already allows for that, and it depends on the governor. In this situation where we are red from top to bottom in both chambers, I think it would be naive to believe that the governor does not already have some degree of influence.
I would just say this about that. Everybody, I think, is in agreement that separate but equal is a good idea when you got three forms of government. And right now, we don't have separate but equal. We have separate but very unequal. And the unequal is on our side. And it needs to be equalized.
And one last thing on your point, sir, because I understand what you're saying. The reality is that it's not the selection, the initial selection, that puts the pressure on the judge. When you're sitting on the bench, you're thinking about your next selection. That's the problem. When you have a lawyer walk in and you know in 3 years I've got to go in front of JMSC, and this guy sits on JMSC, or he's even in the State House, he can talk to people who sit on JMSC. That's the problem. So it's the reselection. So my ultimate solution, many states do this, are retention elections, where the public, once you're picked as a judge, you stay on the bench, and every 6 or 8 years, the public votes up or down. You don't run as a Republican. It's not a contested thing. The public decides whether you keep your job. And if they say no, then it goes back to the governor and the legislature to pick the replacement. So once you're on the bench, you are only accountable to your conscience and the public. That would be my preferred ultimate solution. But in the near term, we can't do that without a constitutional change. In the near term, reform JMSC and at least remove the pernicious influence that body has over our judicial selection.
I said what?
Yeah, who are you asking?
think it's. I think
That
it's
was me.
Yeah.
That was me. Well, I think what it would do is it would liberate the judiciary. That's what we're trying to do here, is restore the independence of the judiciary so that as judges are making decisions on the bench, whether it's the circuit court, the Court of Appeals, or the Supreme Court, they're not looking over their shoulder and going, what are these people going to think about that? They shouldn't be thinking that. That's the problem. That they need to be completely independent of these folks once they're on the bench, and their decisions need to be unfettered and unencumbered by any fear that their decision is going to result in some backlash when they come back here to get reelected. I have a video of a legislator who sits on JMSC, sitting in a separate committee, talking about how he was concerned, this is Todd Rutherford, about all the people getting revoked, their probation getting revoked. He was like, some people think this is a second chance program, probation. Probation is a second chance program. We're not sending you to prison. We're going to give you a chance to live right. We're going to keep an eye on you, and you got to behave. If you don't behave, you go to prison. Well, he said that. You know what the number of people who used to get revoked on probation in 2010, according to Triple P probation pardon parole statistics, 36% of the people put on probation in York County were revoked in 2010. You want to know what it is now? 7%. Because they didn't want them revoking people anymore. So they're not getting revoked. So you tell me, do you think the legislature has any influence over these decisions? I think res ipsa loquitur is a legal phrase. The thing speaks for itself. It's obvious that they do, and that needs to stop.
Most of y'all are Midlands media. All you got to do is look what's going on right here almost every day with people committing violent acts of crime and have been released. Every day. Y'all reported it yesterday. Biggest nonsense I've ever seen. Something's got to be done.
Thank you.
This man every 6 months gives me a list of people that have committed at least 4 serious crimes in the last 3 years and are walking the streets of Newberry County. Right now that list has 59 names on it. It used to have 69. We've done a good job. But there's a serious problem when you got people committing serious crime and getting back on the street over and over and over again. So I think that's all we got. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it very much. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank y'all.
Good job, man.
Thank you forever.